Boa tarde. Good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. I want to start thanking Director General Dieter Jorgensen and all of you, colleagues from the European Commission, for inviting Spain to take part in this timely and crucial discussion. This is a topic of particular relevance to Spain. For many years, we have advocated for a deeper, more structured, and more strategic relationship between Europe and Latin America, a partnership built on shared history, values, and vision for a sustainable and equitable future. Recently, we have made visible this partnership in the summit in Santa Marta of the UCELAC, which we think has been a very fruitful summit because we have made it possible the continuation of the decisions that we made 2 years ago in Brussels. Energy cooperation stands at the very heart of this partnership as it touches upon economic growth, social development, and climate action simultaneously. The fact that COP30 is taking place here in Brazil gives this dialogue special significance. Europe and Latin America are natural partners and essential allies in advancing the global climate and energy agenda. Their collaboration is not merely symbolic. It represents a tangible opportunity to strengthen multilateralism, foster innovation, and create a model of sustainable development that benefits both continents. We are witnessing profound geopolitical changes. Some influential actors are stepping back from multilateral forums or scaling back their climate commitments. Others are questioning the importance of the multilateral system itself, of the Paris Agreement, of international cooperation mechanisms, and of the institutions that underpin global efforts to tackle climate change. These developments are concerning, yet events like this one clearly demonstrate that the majority of countries remain committed to climate action and that collective efforts can still drive meaningful progress. That is why today, sending a message of confidence in the multilateral system, of unity among those who remain committed, and of steadfast determination to act on climate is absolutely essential. At this critical moment, the European Union, and Spain with it, are fully committed to cooperation, dialogue, and bridge building with regions that continue to uphold democracy, multilateralism, and the principles of the United Nations. Latin American and the Caribbean are precisely such like-minded partners, defending both democratic values and climate action. I am particularly pleased to be here today to reinforce this message and to highlight the opportunities that lie ahead when like-minded partners work together. Spain believes that energy cooperation between Europe and Latin America represents one of the greatest opportunities of our times. It allows us to build fair, balanced, and mutual beneficial relationships, strengthening co-development and fostering partnerships that respect human rights, social justice, and equality. We are convinced that there is no real trilemma between access to energy, affordable prices, and decarbonization. On the contrary, the energy transition, the shift away from fossil fuels, the expansion of renewables, and the deployment of clean technologies is not merely a technological transformation. It is a society-wide project. It is a pathway to building more just and inclusive societies, reducing inequalities, fighting poverty, and ensuring that all communities, particularly the most vulnerable, share in the benefits of the green transition. Just as we believe there is no trilemma between energy access, affordability, and decarbonization, we also see no inherent conflict between development and the climate agenda. On the contrary, the climate agenda is a central instrument to foster a new understanding of development, particularly for countries in the global south. It is a tool to achieve a sustainable development goals, to fight poverty, to reduce inequalities, and to ensure that the transition to a decarbonized society is also a transition toward greater social cohesion and justice. By learning from past mistakes and placing solidarity and mutual benefit at the center of our approach, we can create a society where the green transition benefits everyone, economically, socially, and environmentally. For the energy transition to succeed, it must enjoy broad social acceptance. There is only one model, a just transition, placing social justice at the heart of every policy and initiative. It must protect workers, create new opportunities in green industries, and ensure that no one is left behind. This principle must guide international cooperation as well. How we trade, invest, and engage diplomatically can reinforce or undermine our climate objectives. It is essential to promote technological partnerships, knowledge transfers, and development cooperation that provide tangible benefits to people and communities both sides of the Atlantic. Cooperation, in this sense, becomes more than a diplomatic exercise. It becomes a tool for real progress, shared prosperity, and social equity. And we have a tremendous advantage. Renewable energy and decarbonization are not only good for the climate, they make economic sense. Renewable generation is increasingly competitive and often cheaper than fossil alternatives. This offers an opportunity to reduce energy bills, particularly for the most vulnerable, advance toward a most decentralized electricity system, and actively combat energy poverty. At the same time, renewables and green technologies create opportunities to reindustrialize, develop new value chains, and generate high-quality jobs. International cooperation is key here, as these value chains are global, and collaboration between regions, especially between the European Union and Latin America and the Caribbean, is essential to ensure that the development of green technologies happens at the pace required to meet our climate goals. At the national level, Europe and Latin America can exchange best practices and lessons learned on policy design, regulatory frameworks, and community engagement strategies to ensure that the energy transition is effective, inclusive, and socially accepted. This kind of collaboration builds trust, strengthens institutions, and allows us to replicate successes while avoiding pitfalls. Finally, to realize this vision, we must activate all levers, integrating a climate perspective across foreign policy, reducing risks, and ensuring that financing and resources reach the right places. We need to promote investment in energy projects in Latin America and the Caribbean responsible, in coordination with the European Union, so that the benefits of the transition are shared by all. Strategic, well-targeted financing can reduce risks, catalyze investment, and accelerate the deployment of sustainable energy infrastructure across the region. Spain is committed to advancing this vision. In Europe, in Latin America and globally. We are convinced that cooperation, solidarity, and trust are the most powerful forces we have to drive change. By working together, sharing knowledge, and committing to a fair and inclusive transition, we can deliver tangible results for our citizens, our economies, and our planet. In conclusion, let us remember that the fight against climate change is not a zero-sum game. The choices we make today, the partnerships we forge, the technologies we deploy, and the policies we implement will determine whether we build a world that is sustainable, inclusive, and prosperous. Europe and Latin America have a unique opportunity to lead by example, demonstrating that energy security, affordability, decarbonization, and sustainable development can go hand in hand while placing justice, solidarity, and equality at the heart of the transition. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for those welcoming words. Thank you to Spain for convening us and hosting us here at the pavilion. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss what I think is probably the most important aspect of our energy policy, of our security, of our sustainability. That's the transition, the tripling of renewables, the doubling of energy efficiency by 2030, as was agreed at COP28. So what matters now is delivery. We know what needs to be done. We now need to actually do it, and we can only do that by working together, including from across the Atlantic, in Latin America, and in the European Union. The energy trilemma that is part of this defines this decade. Access is a real concern. Globally, 600 million people still lack access to electricity. Affordability, we saw in the European Union in 2022 how our dependence on imported fossil fuels drove up energy prices and caused economic havoc. And then decarbonization, renewables are the way forward. We know now that more than 90% of new installed generation capacity is renewable, but again, we need to make sure that that is shared across the world, including in Latin America, Sub-Saharan Africa, and Asia. So this is not a debate, it's an economic reality, it's a security reality, it's an investment reality, but we need to act and we need to cooperate to help make it happen. Europe and Latin America can really help show that access, affordability, and decarbonization are reinforcing components of the energy system. And so with that, I would like to invite the distinguished panel to join me up here. First of all, Ambassador Matt, I'm going to ask you you're not joining, my apologies. I'm not going to ask you. First of all, then, Ambroise, thank you very much for joining, Vice President at the European Investment Bank. Dan Dorner, Head of Strategic Initiatives Office and the Sherpa of the International Energy Agency. Dan, good to see you again. Jorge Concha, Director at the Development Bank of Latin America. Jorge, please come up. Thank you for joining. And then Thomas Serebrisky of the IDB. Thomas, pleasure to meet you. So, a warm welcome to everyone. Thank you very much for joining. Allow me to start with an opening question for the four of you. And maybe I start with you, Ambroise, and we work our way down that way. So both Europe and Latin America face the challenge of actually delivering the energy trilemma, making sure that there is access, affordability, decarbonization, and at the same time, handling what is a significant geopolitical uncertainty and challenges and economic pressures. So could I ask you, from your perspective, what should be the top priorities to strike this balance between the different requirements, between the different goals? And where do you see the strongest potential in that context for EU-Latin America cooperation? Ambroise, please.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to see you. And many thanks for the question. And I will try to take the question indeed with the angle, what do we have in common in the way we approach that in Europe and Latin America? EIB is the Bank of the European Union, so we finance projects that have a European interest. 90% is inside Europe, 10% is outside Europe, including in Latin America. And last year, what we have financed is 31 billion euros of projects that have a clean energy context. So 91 billion euros means that we have quite a big experience in terms of renewable energy and what we can do in terms of grids, etc. In Latin America, we have signed this morning a big project with Neoenergia, so the subsidiary of Iberdrola, 300 million euros for increasing access to energy in Bahia for 250,000 members of the communities in Bahia that had no access to electricity. And we are also having, Nadia Calvino was there for the summit EU CELAC, and she signed 1 billion euro of access to regional electricity in Central American countries. Now, this afternoon I'm also going to sign a very interesting project on more nature-based solution for access. Now, when you look at the comparison between Europe and Latin America, I would say that there are quite similarities. And in particular, the fact that both electricity markets are dominant. 60% of electricity is renewable energy in Latin America, 50% in Europe. So we have similar challenges. And among the challenges, I would quote two. One is grids. We need to develop grids. We need to invest in grids. We need to invest in storage, in flexible response. We need to do that in Europe. We need to do the same thing in Latin America. The second thing is the need to develop a clean tech industrial base. We have the clean industrial deal in Europe for that, and I think it's also something that is needed if we want to have some energy independence in the future. I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Dan. If I may pass on to you, as the International Energy Agency, you were created on the basis of one energy crisis. You have helped steer us through another energy crisis. So security is central to your mandate, access is central to your mandate, but you've equally been leading and providing analysis and data and a framework to discuss the transition and affordability. So if I could ask you for on the same topic, EU, Latin America, how would you see it from the IEA, please?
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you, Dita. And let me try and span the arc of those two critical issues. So I think in terms of key priorities, I would say, firstly, diversification of energy sources. Both regions still have more opportunities that will enable them to reduce their dependence on imported forms of fuel and particular kind of import sources. So that can be diversification in terms of working together collaboratively to develop domestic resources, also working together on the issue of regional connectivity and integration, and then also diversification at the global level to make sure, especially when we're looking both at the energy economy of today and the energy economy of tomorrow, to make sure that the concentration risks that we see are diversified away. So I think that diversification of energy sources piece is one priority area. The second, I would say, is the nexus of access, affordability, and fairness. I think in Latin America, energy access in remote areas is still, there's still more work to be done there. I think energy affordability, while very different contexts, is a common issue across Europe and Latin America. And I think the EU's Affordable Energy Action Plan is something very positive and something that can be shared with countries in Latin America, and look to how that can be showcased as some model actions to be done beyond the EU. And also then I think thirdly on the decarbonisation as a driver of growth. We've already heard renewables already have a very high level of penetration in this region. They're growing very quickly in Europe, seeing the evidence, the data of the clean energy transition as a driver of growth, a driver of jobs, but also a desire in the policies to make sure that local value add is captured and that local communities see the economic, social benefits of those transitions. I think, again, is another very common issue, and we've certainly seen in our Global Commission on People-Centered Transitions, which has been co-led by Executive Vice President Teresa Ribeira and also by Minister Silveira of Brazil, both real leaders on this issue over a long period of time. So again, I think an obvious collaborative point there. I think just lastly, I would say, in kind of other kind of concrete terms, I would say technology and policy exchange. There is still a lot to be learnt as we go through the clean energy transition in all regions. So sharing that knowledge in terms of deploying technology, having the policies in place to do so effectively is one where the convening, the sharing, the discussions is very valuable. The investment and financing piece, very much one where we're trying to make sure that the investment needs to grow, the cost of that finance needs to shrink, and we need to make sure that in regions of the world that financing is absolutely affordable. And then absolutely, once again, just that people-centered transitions, making sure that communities, citizens, consumers, all part of this transition, they all feel bought into it and we have that public acceptance. I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Dan. Jorge, if I may pass on to you, how does that resonate with you from your perspective and the Latin America European Union cooperation, please?
Sure. Thank you very much for the question. Thank you for the invitation to CAF. It's a pleasure for us to be here with all of you. Answering your questions, of course, there are priorities for supply side, for demand side. For supply side, as you already mentioned, the energy efficiency in systems are, of course, a huge priority for the region. But the green electrification and the integration of the markets and physical integration of the region is already a great priority and a great opportunity. Finally, from the supply side, the promotion, the use of clean fuels, also the using of natural gas as a transition fuel will be important in the next years. From the demand side, for CAF, it's important to support the households, the energy efficiency in households, but also the support the access and the quality in access for all households, especially in rural areas. The industrial and the hard abatement industrial use are very important for the region. Just to sum up, which will be the top priority from CAF perspective and in the relationship with the European Union, as I have already said, the physical integration of our our countries is a very interesting thing. Of course, there are barriers like our countries are not very eager to these integration policies sometimes because of strategic risks that are in the interdependency of different countries, but there are also technical issues related, for example, about the different frequency in the different systems, and also the lack of a harmonization between the different regulatory frameworks. But examples as the integration in Central America and the support from the European Union, from the Global Gateway initiatives are a good example of how can European Union and Latin America can work together in this important priority. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And if I may turn to you, Thomas, from the IDB perspective, please.
Great. Thank you. Let me start by providing some numbers. In Latin America, the electricity matrix is quite clean, I would say. More than 60% of the electricity matrix come from renewable sources already. It's true that most of it comes from hydro, but countries in Latin America have made significant inroads in diversifying with solar and wind. It's a region that is lucky in terms of endowment of solar and wind resources. Of course, this masks significant heterogeneity. We have countries that have 100% renewable matrices. Uruguay, Paraguay. On the contrary, we have countries, especially in the Caribbean, 100% fossil fuel. So that's where we have to put the effort jointly with the European Commission on helping the countries that have rely on fossil fuels on diversify the matrix. And then on access, Latin America has made tremendous progress. In the last 30 years, it went from around 70% of access to 98.7%. But still we have 18 million people without access. So every person counts, so 18 million is a lot. And by the way, the IDB, the Inter-American Development Bank, is launching in half an hour an energy accelerator facility with resources from the climate funds, with the idea of really closing the access gap in the Amazonia, where we know it's extremely difficult, isolated communities. And then comes affordability. Unfortunately, Latin America doesn't perform well in affordability. Tariffs are the highest among developing regions, still lower than Europe, but are the highest. And expenditure in energy accounts for over 10% of an average household budget. So there we have an important agenda going forward. First and foremost, reshaping subsidies and targeting those that need it, the most vulnerable. And there we have, in many countries, significant work to do, as subsidies tend to be generalized and not targeted or demand allocated on a means targeted basis. But probably one of the areas that, and by the way, we've been working closely with the European Commission, the European Investment Bank, is on energy integration, an issue that was raised by all my fellow panelists. We have projects in Ecuador and Peru, the integration between Ecuador and Peru. We're co-financing one project in Argentina, and we are working on the policy dimension in many areas with the European Commission. And that's what we need, and Jorge mentioned this issue, is on the policy side, the regulatory side. Integration means a lot of dialogue, a lot of differing interests that are coming all together. We have, as a region, good experiences. Probably the best is in Central America, with a system that is named CIEPAC, that has been in place for a few years, and the European Commission is providing now significant technical assistance. And the IDB is fortunate to be the technical secretariat of emerging integration systems, or one is CIESUR for the Southern Cone, CINEA for Chile, Ecuador, and Peru. But we are years away. Just to give you another number, and sorry for providing many numbers, only 2% of the total demand is transacted across countries. In Europe, that number is much, much higher. And what we need is a sound regulatory system, pricing mechanism, arbitration clauses. So that's where I think we should work and collaborate going forward.
Thank you very much, everyone, and thank you, Thomas, for these remarks about interconnectedness, cross-border infrastructure as a critical element for access to energy, affordable energy, and energy security and sustainability. Ambroise, may I come back to you from the European Investment Bank perspective, because we've heard about this infrastructure challenge. We've also talked about the people-centered transition, the need to ensure affordable energy. And you have said, Thomas, that here in Latin America, the affordability, the social aspects of energy are particularly challenging. Could you say a bit more about, from the European Investment Bank, how would you integrate those considerations? How will you help make sure that the projects you support help the social inclusion and at the same time, of course, are economically viable in order to further trigger the investments, the benefits for the wider economy?
Look, I think the project we have signed this morning with Neo Energia answers to that, because it gives access to electricity to people who did not have access to electricity before. And that's something that responds to what you are talking about, is the just transition. And we all know that energy transition will be successful only if it is just. That's something we believe in Europe. We have actually financing for that in Europe. The Just Transition Fund in particular, that helps communities or regions that are a bit behind, make sure that everybody has the feeling that it is part of the energy transition. That's something that we do also outside Europe in the JETP programs, the Just Energy Transition Partnerships, that we have put in place with a few countries, and where the just transition part is a key element of it. We have done that in particular in South Africa. So there are no countries here in Latin America. But after all, why not? And if it is not through this program, it can be through other programs. What we have done there is a project with Transnet, which is the rail company of South Africa, to make sure that not only they would green the railway system, but also they would make sure that we would do some reskilling, upskilling of workers that would be set aside by this energy transition. That's also what we should do everywhere, because it's really part of the just transition that we are all looking for if we want the energy transition to be successful.
Thank you very much, Ambroise. Jorge, we have heard from Ambroise, the European Investment Bank, which is a European bank, but also the largest global development bank. If I could ask you to address this from a Latin American perspective, from the Development Bank of Latin America, what do you see as the key obstacles, one of the most significant obstacles to making these investments happen, and what would your advice be to try to reduce the barriers and help bring the investments and support that is needed?
Thank you, Dite. From our perspective, giving some context, in the last 4 years from CAF, we have financed $7,000 million in energy projects. From our public side, we have focused in energy transmission, in energy transition, also in generation. From our private side, we have focused more in renewable, like wind, solar, hydrogen. And in these operations, in these projects, we have faced, I would say, two kinds of barriers. First of all, we have some project or technical barriers. Maybe the most important in Latin America has to do with the transmission capacity of our networks, and it's actually a difficult issue for the transmission and for some very huge investment in renewable energies that hasn't the capacity to transmit this energy to more populated areas. We can think about the situation in Chile with a very great energy generation capacity in solar energy in the north, but with constraint to transmit this energy to the south, and that has an effect on the affordability of the energy in those countries. This kind of more project-to-project barriers has to do also with the procedures, with the legal procedures, and all the permits and all our bureaucratic structure to make these projects happen. From a more, I would say, a strategic or economic point of view, I want to highlight how it's important to create enable conditions to make this just transition happen. In the region, we have some very interesting examples, like here in Brazil. In the last 5 years, the green investment in Brazil, the green financing in Brazil has quintuplicated thanks to the investment in renewable energies. This investment has been attracted by active policies related with regulatory framework, related with financing programs, with taxes and subsidies. This can be an example for some situations, and this is an example of that this transition and to tackle these barriers, it's possible in a very dynamic and complex context like is in Latin America.
Thank you very much for that perspective, Jorge. Dan, if I may come back to you from the IEA perspective, you have a convening power. You talk to governments, you talk to the financial sector, investors, the private sector. And I wondered if you can draw out some experience, some lessons from that in terms of how do these different actors best work together to fill the gap. We know that we're not on track to meet our 2030 targets. We see good progress on renewable energy, much less so on energy efficiency. And then, of course, there's this challenge of the just transition. Anything you can help us with from the IEA perspective on that?
Yeah, I think actually it's a recognition that the need for convening and conversations is absolutely crucial. This is a clean energy transition, but it's really an economy-wide transition. And therefore conversations just within the power sector or the energy sector just don't get us there. And so while the power sector may be leading the way, and within that the supply side leading the way, we can see obviously now a big focus on the need to kind of catch up when it comes to grids, interconnections, management of the grid, but also a recognition that the overall sequencing of the transition in many ways is often a little bit out of kilter. And different parts of the economy, different parts of the overall system are moving at different speeds and are not necessarily looking at what each other are doing or how they interconnect and interrelate with one another, which can throw up new bottlenecks, new problems, new challenges. So I think when you put it in the framework of the action that has been committed to in COP28 in the global stocktake, obviously the most concrete aspect of possibly the most concrete package that any COP has ever made on energy with regards to tripling of renewables and doubling of energy efficiency. You can see there a good illustration of that kind of disconnect and the fact that we need all of the pieces to work more effectively together. So on the tripling side, we get to report year after year of how we've broken new records in terms of renewables deployment. 22nd year last year, I'm sure it'll be the 23rd consecutive year this year, but we're still, with our forecasts, not on track for that tripling by 2030. We're still only forecasting 2.6 times, and that interconnectivity with the grid and bringing on that capacity in a way that is fully utilized and not curtailed, or in a way that can actually get connected and is not waiting for a grid connection, is absolutely crucial to bridging that remaining gap to that tripling. And then on the efficiency side, we can see the doubling actually in many ways was more challenging than the tripling. So going from 2% to 4% and then seeing that actually the progress so far is that we're at 1 to 2% rather than going from 2 to 4% should be a real wake-up call for everyone that more needs to be done there. And again, there are some areas there where you can see the interconnectivity, the need for conversations needs to be more active than it currently is. So we've seen a lot of the activity in terms of demand growth has been on industry, for example, but the efforts there to make sure that the highest level of efficiency in industry is applied is not happening. And then on appliances, we can often see that the policies are not keeping up with the technology. And actually the appliances and the technologies available have made great strides on efficiency, but the policies and the policy trajectories that the governments are looking to take haven't even kept pace with the technologies that they should be in front of, not behind of. So I think these are just a couple of illustrations about how and where we need to bring those conversations together more, and we need to make sure that people are seeing the full picture and that people are making sure that they're aiming ahead and not playing catch-up. Thanks.
Thank you very much for those points, Dan. I'll come back on the energy efficiency and we'll ask you something, because you've developed very good programs on energy efficiency, or good instruments on energy efficiency. But if I could turn to you first, Thomas, because one of the other things we have heard, and I hear it everywhere in the corridors here, is what Dan also said, this access to grids, reducing the curtailment rates. I know that in Latin America, the curtailment rates are actually very high because of that lack of interconnectedness between countries, between markets. You mentioned before the very impressively high rates of renewable energy in the systems. A lot of that is hydro, And hydro, of course, also has the storage capacity, the pumped hydro storage capacity. That storage capacity is absolutely critical to reduce curtailment rates and to make a more efficient use of the renewable energy system. Could you tell us a bit about how do you approach that, the storage aspect? What can governments do differently to facilitate that and strengthen the storage aspect of energy policies?
I guess that's, I would say, the new area of work. Clearly, transmission is the key constraint going forward. Curtailment is extremely high these days. It's approximately $7 billion a year in Latin America. That's high for the system. But unfortunately, countries do not request or demand, at least from the MDBs, financing or that much financing for transmission lines, for integration, or in general for transmission, and less so for batteries, for storage. There are many reasons for that. One is clearly the social licensing. The other is, and probably this is the major constraint, is regulation. Energy markets are quite sophisticated. If you compare energy to transport, water and sanitation, energy markets are much more complex. And here I should say that the region is lagging in terms of the capacity of energy regulators to set the rules, give the incentives for the adoption of storage. Pricing is key. Even we have very few countries, for instance, at the end user level with dynamic pricing. Smart meters are lagging behind. So those are very pressing challenges for the region. So in that regard, cooperation with Europe in general is very much welcome, because you are way more advanced on market design, regulation. That's where we need, as a region, quite a bit of technical assistance and convincing. For instance, I'll give you an example and refer to the energy efficiency agenda. That's where Latin America is really lagging behind. But the problem there is that utilities don't have any incentive to increase efficiency, because they reduce the amount of electricity that is billed. So why would they increase efficiency? To sell less? So that's where you need clear incentives from the public sector, the policy side, and appropriate targets and enforcement of those targets.
Thank you very much, and indeed a lot of common challenges across Europe and Latin America, and areas where we can work together more closely on energy system and energy system efficiencies. Ambroise, could I ask you to come back on this question of energy efficiency? One of the things we have been discussing over the last few years is that energy efficiency investments are often there are obstacles, including high capital costs, and you get the benefits back over a longer period of time. So high capital costs and operating costs where you have to wait quite long to amortize them. So you have put in place an instrument specifically for small and medium-sized enterprises that are more challenged by that. Could you share that experience, please?
So, thanks, Dita. What we have put in place, what we are putting in place, is an initiative to double what we do for energy efficiency in SMEs through traditional instruments, like we lend to banks at very interesting conditions, for banks to lend to SMEs for energy efficiency projects. But we see that it is not working at the pace that is consistent with what we need. So we have two pilot projects that we are launching with two funds, with the concept of servitization. So energy as a service. So the SME has not to to buy the equipment, but will pay the use of the equipment with the savings that we'll make through the reduced energy bill. And that's something that is very interesting. We will see if it works well. If it works well, it has a huge potential. So that's why we put a lot of capital in most ways, not only financial capital, but also political capital in these two initiatives with the two funds that we hope will show that there are ways for SMEs to increase energy efficiency and at a cost that is not high.
Thank you very much, Ambroise. We are reaching the end of this session. If I were to give you one word each, what would the word be in terms of what can we do between the European Union and Latin America? Any short kind of snap remarks? Dan, you look as if you have something to share. Please.
I can't help myself, Dieter, apologies. But very briefly, so I just want to make one point, which is I think we've already covered very good ground about the areas of cooperation between Europe and Latin America. But I would also say the partnership and alignment between Europe and Latin America in engaging globally. I think there's a really powerful story with Europe and Latin America to be working together to engage with other regions of the world, coming from a global north, global south perspective, coming from one that already has very high renewables penetration to one that is going to very high renewables penetration. So I think, as we're here in COP, it's just to think about both collaboration between the regions, but also collaboration on the global stage.
Thank you very much. Going global. Thomas, you look as if you have something to add as well, please.
Maybe one point that is related to the energy transition is critical minerals. We need more. We are already working together, but it's a critical area. Critical minerals, yeah, absolutely, and help Latin America move downstreams in the value chain, in the supply chain.
Please.
Just a quick remark, maybe from the next session of this kind of panel, is that we have talked about the priorities and barriers, very focusing in Latin America, but the Caribbean has another matrix and another kind of issues, and the cooperation between the European Commission, European Union, and the Caribbean can be very, very useful for the development of those regions.
Thank you very much, everyone, for those comments. Also for expanding to recognize the critical role, as you've said, no pun intended, but the critical role of critical minerals for the energy transition and the challenges we see globally, both as Latin America and as European Union, the scope, the need for closer cooperation there, the need to go global, work with other regions, including the Caribbean, that are facing particular challenges as being islands with everything that brings, but also, of course, being subjected to extreme weather events that require a different type of resilience integration into the energy systems and into energy security. A lot of good comments and ideas have come out here. We look forward to continuing the discussion, but above all, look forward to strengthening the cooperation between the European Union and Latin America, both for access to energy, for sustainability, for affordability. There's a lot to benefit from there. We in Europe have a close and integrated energy market across the European Union. It benefits from regulatory structures, from governance structures, and that clear regulation provides predictability, certainty, and investment. And we would be glad to share that and to share best practices and experiences. So with that, I will close this event. Thank you very much, everyone. We look forward to continuing. Thank you for joining.